In this episode, we speak with Tim Weiss, co-founder and CEO of Optera, a sustainability management software company which enables companies to track, manage, and achieve goals in a platform designed and supported by sustainability experts. Tim is responsible for Optera's long-term strategy and vision. He has spearheaded thought-leading work with the World Economic Forum and Fortune 500 companies across many industries. Prior to Optera, Tim worked for AES Distributed Energy and Uncharted. Since 2006, Optera's team has provided leading corporations with innovative solutions to lower costs and accelerate progress toward their climate and sustainability goals. Their research of the business case for climate action helped to launch science-based emissions targets found in publications such as The 3% Solution, The Climate Has Changed, Green Giants, Reinventing Fire, and New Climate Economy. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the executive chairman of Market Insight Media and managing partner of GrowthCap. He is the host of Key Executives, a podcast for driven executives and business operators. Our podcast covers all topics related to effective business leadership, from strategy and culture to products and services to sales and marketing and everything in between. In the minutes ahead, we'll share with you unique insights and tactics from some of today's most accomplished and inspiring executives.
Tim, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So as we were chatting before I hit record here, you live in a great part of the country, and presumably it fits well with kind of what you're doing company-wise. Maybe to kick off, give us a little bit of background on yourself, and then we'll start talking about Optera.
Yeah, would love to. So I guess I can start with my journey. I went to undergrad at Colorado College, which is down in Colorado Springs. I'm currently based in Colorado, so it's come full circle. I studied environmental policy back in college, and it was kind of a mixture of economics, political science, environmental science. And I just found myself, I would say the one way I describe myself is kind of a pragmatic tree hugger in a way, where I think that we need to use the tools of capitalism to fix capitalism and to really find a way to have a sustainable economy and way for us to operate as a society. And I've just been very keyed in and interested in solving those problems throughout my career. That first took me to Africa. I worked in sub-Saharan Africa, spinning up markets for small-scale renewable energy with an NGO that spanned Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, and really helped grow and expand their footprint dramatically. And it was kind of my first taste of entrepreneurship and of kind of the effect of clean energy on people's lives and having access to those sorts of technologies. And so that has really carried me through my entire career. And now I've been on the journey. We moved back to Colorado and have been here for about 10 years. And much of that has been as part of this journey in building and scaling Optera.
And how did you link up with the company? Or did you co-found it, or did you get recruited into the organization?
Yeah, we have an interesting origin story. So there was a precursor organization to Optera, which is called Point 380. It was a boutique consulting firm that was started by my co-founders that spun out of the Rocky Mountain Institute, which is an influential think tank in the climate and energy landscape. They had about a decade of work as a boutique consulting firm. I met them around 2015, and I was in business school at the time and really was interested in getting into the corporate climate space because that was when Paris was getting negotiated. I mean, we saw a lot of companies stepping up ambition on climate after Paris, and there was clearly a lot of momentum in spinning up the transition to the low carbon economy and the energy transition. And so fast forward a year, I finished business school. I was working in commercial renewables at the time, but then left there and joined my co-founders, Jason and Ty, and we started building what's become Optera. And really, we pivoted from what was a pure play consulting firm into a SaaS company that still offers professional services. But the hallmark of what we do is we help many of the largest companies in the world in their transition to the low carbon economy by helping them quantify their carbon emissions and understand how they can really meaningfully manage that risk across their business. So, what suppliers and what key activities within their supply chain are contributing to climate transition and physical risk, and what does that mean in terms of total emissions overall, and where are their true hotspots and risks lying, as well as their operations, and then things downstream in their products. So we kind of cover the full value chain and have had a lot of deep experience working with companies of all sizes, from the top 10 in the world to, mid-market companies that are just getting started.
And is the catalyst to these large corporations, is the catalyst to them adopting a solution such as yours, driven by regulations, or is it more self-policing? We don't want to be bad actors, and our board mandates that we should monitor these things. What's really driving kind of the adoption of your solution?
Yeah, it's a suite of factors. I'd say that there's an overarching arc that is clear within the economy today, which is we are in the middle of the transition to the low carbon economy. Over, I think it was 94% of all new energy on the grid last year in the US was clean. Like that is pure market dominance from renewable energy right now. This transition to low carbon economy is creating a suite of risks and opportunities for every company. If they are operating a business and selling products, it's not conducive to that transition, they are not going to win. And so business executives, C-level executives, investors, the kind of market forces are here and have kind of ramped up over the last 5 years, I'd say. They've kind of started in the voluntary market 20 years ago, but now it's really starting to come to a head that we are midway in this transition and companies need to really respond and understand how they're going to compete in this new landscape. So that is one kind of macro trend. But then the kind of discrete drivers that are happening within that landscape is that regulation has moved. So Europe has a suite of regulations that are requiring companies to disclose their emissions, their climate risk, to substantiate their claims about their net zero goals. And the same is true with California. And then we recently saw 4 additional states that are proposing legislation that would essentially be copy paste of what California has put into place. And so we're just seeing the market forces as kind of the macro trend, and then regulators are stepping up to provide a bit more certainty as to when the rules of the road are changing and when the kind of key competitive forces are going to start influencing behavior.
Now, I imagine when you're on the front end, I mean, the fortunate part here is you had a long history with your co-founders being a consultant. And so seeing what the market was like, where the demand was coming from. But would you, if you're creating a SaaS solution, do you hone in on a particular sector that has particular metrics and where the problem areas typically lie? Or do you go broader just to see all the different areas you could possibly address? Like, how did you start the go-to-market process?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a million ways to make this transition poorly from consulting to SaaS. There's maybe a few ways to do it right. I think the way that we approached it was to be really specific in terms of the need that we were fulfilling with our customers of what can be productized, what is ready to be productized in our landscape, in our world, because not everything is. And we're still at a point where not everything is. This is a brand new exercise, brand new that's taken 20 years to get to this point, but it's still relatively brand new in terms of its scale across the globe for every company. So for us, we started very intentionally with our key customers in the electronics industry. We had the privilege of working with many leaders like Hewlett Packard Enterprise and Intel and Cisco and for many, many years. And we started building software really to meet their needs. And we saw that it was really well suited to how their organization needed to tackle these issues on carbon emissions management, carbon accounting, and then rolling that throughout their business. We then expanded on that, right? So we've gone past just the electronics industry into deeper manufacturing across their supply chains. But then also we do a lot in retail. And so we have the privilege of working with many huge big box retailers and many of their suppliers. And so those are key industries for us because we felt that they were showing signs early on of operating ahead of a regulatory mandate, but in a way that was conducive to what the regulations were going to look like. And so what's interesting about any sort of regulatory market from what I've seen is that the rules don't just come out of nowhere. They kind of come out of precedence that's been established before the regulations are taking effect. And so for us, we try to make big waves in our market to show what's possible and how companies can do this effectively. And then what's transpired is regulations that incorporate things like emissions from your suppliers, like scope 3 emissions and other things that we've helped really unlock.
Now, what does, like, say, a big retailer do if it detects issues with its partners, its suppliers? Does it then say, like, okay, we got to stop working with you, or you have to, like, figure out how to reduce your carbon emissions?
So one step back on this question is kind of one of the biggest trends that I see right now is the dissemination of sustainability across the business. And so when we're working with a company like Target or Best Buy or folks like that, like there is a core sustainability function, but now there are core sustainability responsibilities that live within supply chain, that live within procurement or compliance and finance. And so when we think about the approach to engaging suppliers or de-risking kind of their behavior, really the first big thing is to involve those experts, the procurement specialists, the supply chain specialists that are managing the relationship with that supplier. Because how you respond and how you engage with that supplier is dependent on a lot of different things. But mostly it's what your relationship with that supplier looks like. Are they very strategic? Are they super important? Do you have a lot of leverage? Do you not have a lot of leverage? How important is their operations to your business overall? And then how big a risk are they in terms of their performance on climate or other kind of social and governance issues that may be arising from regulatory pressure or other macro factors? And so what organizations need from what we see is they need tools and data to bring this to the right people within their organizations to make the right decisions on how to engage. So some companies may see a supplier and go all carrot. And they just say, hey, we want to help you incentivize, we want to help you invest in renewables, we want to give you more resources and tools and build your capacity. And some companies might be all stick where they say, we cannot renew your contract if you don't comply. And we've seen everything across the spectrum. And it largely depends on who those experts are in that supply chain team and what they understand that relationship to be. And then also what's the acute kind of nature of the risk that they pose. The last thing I'll say on this is that we have recently announced a partnership with SPS Commerce. They are a large supply chain software provider, a publicly traded company that does a lot of EDI work for folks that are familiar with the supply chain space. We partnered with them specifically because they have a core expertise in helping organizations engage with their supply chain and distill and exchange information across that ecosystem. And we've obviously learned a lot from the climate lens and how organizations can collaborate effectively, but we are now really leaning into heavily into the supply chain and procurement teams and merchandising teams or retailers to really streamline all these activities so that everyone's playing off the same playbook, the initiatives are the same, and the collaboration is yielding really exciting results.
Well, we'll switch into a little bit on the executive function and leadership, but on this point, I'm curious, do most companies now have a chief sustainability officer, and how big is that organization? Or is it kind of like a fad? It comes and goes depending on the administration and what's kind of in the popular press.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's top of everyone's mind right now of like what's happening within companies because of the new administration and what they're targeting in terms of ESG and other practices. The CSO role is one that's been around for quite a while. There's many companies that will always have that role and it will continue to grow in importance. We also see another model that is working well, which is to really have the responsibility of the sustainability team fit under a core function that is most strategically tied to decarbonization and the transition to low carbon economy. So we see some organizations whose largest climate risk is transitioning their supply chain, right? So they need to figure out how to decarbonize their supplier base. They need to solve that problem in order to comply with regulations like the new carbon taxes in Europe or other things. So they might have the sustainability team really roll up through the chief supply chain officer or chief procurement officer. The other end of the spectrum would be folks on maybe the manufacturing or consumer goods space where their sustainability function is helping them do business. It's helping them win contracts. It's helping them kind of with their core value proposition. And they might find their sustainability team really sits within their marketing or sales organization. And then there's others that fit it under compliance and risk. I see this as a maturation of this function where this is becoming deeply tied to business value and organizations are understanding better where it should sit. So I say this not to say that the chief sustainability function isn't a great one, and we've seen a lot of successes with having that structure. It's just not the only one. Even we see other companies taking another approach. I guess the macro side, like just on the Trump administration and other things, I think we see generally companies are quietly staying the course on climate because they see this macro trend. There's not a lot of benefits to being very public right now because there's a lot of scrutiny on companies. But I think the main thing is the economy doesn't move backwards, right? Like we don't backtrack as a society on how we're progressing in terms of capital markets and efficiency and improvements in technology. And so the improvements that we've made over the last 20 years are going to drive most of corporate progress on climate. And that's not stopping.
Okay, now transitioning to you as CEO, how do you spend your day? How do you split up your time?
It's a great question. So for me, there's a mixture of different phases of our growth as a company. There's different moments where I have to be more operationally focused or more externally focused. When I'm in fundraising mode, there's kind of a clear blinders on, let's go raise capital and focus and trust the team to kind of get through that period and execute on kind of the agreed goals and objectives and everything. And there's also kind of a role that I can play, which is kind of key for us in the past 6 to 9 months, which is trying to identify unique opportunities for us in the market. We kind of live in a very noisy and new industry that garners a lot of attention. It has a lot of different complementarities with other organizations out in the world. So I mentioned our new partnership with SPS, but we were fortunate to be in a position where there's a lot of organizations that really we can effectively collaborate with to deliver value in the world. And so a lot of what I've done over the past 6 months or so is really to help our organization find and identify and then develop those opportunities. So my core focus is always oriented on how can I, from my position, benefit my organization the most. And that might be moments where I really focus on team building and really help support the operating objectives of the company and help shepherd things along. I'm fortunate enough to have an incredible group of individuals that I trust deeply that enables me to have a more external focus at times where I can really try to bring back some incredible opportunities for us to then achieve kind of new level of growth.
I can imagine that given how your company is mission driven and there's a lot of folks out there that are environmentalists, and yet they have these tech skills, they're software engineers. So Optera seems like the best place to work. How have you gone about recruiting, or do folks just come to you?
I mean, it's interesting because we've grown up as an organization both during the pandemic and now kind of post-pandemic. So we've seen an evolution in the overall market, for employment and everything and what people are interested in. I would say that we are in a privileged position where many of the best and brightest people across many industries want to dedicate their careers to a bigger purpose. I do, and I understand that psychology. I understand what it means to have some greater mission in mind when waking up every day and trying to make things happen for an organization. And I probably won't ever have a moment in my career where I'm not like deeply committed to the purpose and mission of the organization I'm involved in. So I think what that has enabled is us to really compile and attract talent from individuals that share that mentality, that have a deeply committed goal of helping improve the planet we live on and ensure we have a viable planet for the future generations. And they also want to use their skills and talents to further that mission. And so it's been an area where we have recruited at times, but often we find ourselves being able to attract some incredible talent just because of who we are and what we do. And I think that one other thing I'll mention in terms of recruiting is I really care about company values. I really care about the culture we create. And one of the things that is really impactful about building a company culture that is really strong and it is owned by your team, but obviously reinforced by you at the top, is that the hiring process, the kind of who you attract, even during the interview process, is going to yield people that really fit the culture. Because if the culture is strong enough, the people radiate it. They radiate what you believe in, what your values and principles are. And if people don't fit that culture, they probably won't make it through that process. And so that's always been something that I've been really intentional about, but I think that our team does an incredible job of reinforcing and then really executing on.
I have two final questions, but before I hit on those, curious about your investors. I remember a time where if you were more mission driven, sustainability driven, you attracted one type of investor. And then over time, there was like this blending of like, we do want financial return, we also want impact return. So what does it look like today? Are your investors, is it a mix, or are they like particularly driven by both missions, or one or the other? Or is like, how important do you sacrifice on the financial return if you could get bigger return on the impact?
Yeah, it's a great question. My perspective is there's no difference between the two. So everyone is driven by financial returns. I don't actually think there's anyone that's in the venture capital for-profit landscape that is willing to sustain lower than market returns for a given period of time with any purpose. And I think that makes sense. I mentioned I'm kind of a pragmatic tree hugger. Like I very much understand the tools of capitalism. And I think that as we want to progress society in a way that's beneficial, we have to understand the rules of the game and the incentives of the game. And so for me, I have a lot of investors on our cap table that are climate investors, but they are no less rigorous on their goals for their funds and the returns that they seek. And I think that's good. I think that's the right approach. So I think generally there's not much difference. I think the only difference is really the focal point. So it's like, I would characterize myself as someone who's an executive within the climate tech community. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I am, less driven or less motivated by the same motivators within the rest of the landscape. It just means that this is my focal point. This is where my expertise lies and where I'm going to spend my time. And so that's what I see with these investors. There's no question that right now, though, there's a lot of challenges to anyone that brands themselves as a climate fund. And I think that this is going to be a very short window of time where that is true from what I see, because there are a lot of very smart people in the world that understand where this is all going long term, where our economy is going, where technology is going, and the intersection between a sustainable economy and a growth economy, a profitable economy. Those things are one and the same. They can't exist separately. And we're not really ever going to diverge that much, I don't believe.
Mm-hmm. Last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who's had a profound influence on you?
I mean, the person who stands out the most to me is actually my grandmother. And I've had a lot of amazing business mentors in my life and still have, and my board members are fantastic. But my grandmother is someone who, from the very early days showed me really what it is to be true to yourself and what it is to follow your heart and your passions. When you align kind of your core values with your purpose and where you're spending your time, kind of when your head and your heart are aligned, it's a powerful force. And I learned it firsthand from her. And it's something that I have taken with me throughout my entire career. And I hope to inspire into my daughter and others around me. But I think that truly the people that I see that are able to have the biggest positive effect in the world really have that head and heart alignment. And she was an incredible human who helped show that to me.
Excellent. Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
It's interesting. I think that it's funny for me to have to think about this a little bit, being someone who's in the impact space. So I spend all of my time.
It's like this question may not be relevant.
And no, it is. I think what's interesting is like it's not a cop out to spend your time doing things that are good. It doesn't mean you can't stop giving back. I think that like there's a lot of different ways in which we like to give back, me and my family. So my wife is a school board member of our local school district, was a career teacher. She's currently at home, but as a school board member, I'm just deeply committed to education and public education. I think it is the backbone of our democracy. I think it is what has created such an incredible country that we live in. And we are very active and involved in our school district and try to help in any way we can. And I would say that that's probably a big one, but I would say the other one that I frequently support, and it's kind of also along these same veins, is NPR. I believe that public radio is a source of credible information and information that is essential to people navigating the world today. And there's a host of like environmental organizations that we love to support as well and other things. But I think those are maybe a couple that stand out.
Well, Tim, want to thank you again for taking the time for this conversation. It's been a really good one.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate the time.